Hello everyone, welcome to Story Vault YouTube channel. Hope you enjoy the video. What was the scariest, we need to leave now, gut feeling that you've ever experienced? Serious, Part 3. Story 1. A shady-looking guy told me to come here when I was waiting for my mom under the apartment building. I was about 10. I ran upstairs immediately without looking back. Looking back as a 25-year-old, I couldn't imagine why any normal adult would need to speak to a random 10-year-old unless the kid looks lost or is doing something dangerous. Glad I bolted. Comments. Around that age, I was walking my dog around the block, and one of our neighbors on the street over introduced himself to me. Complimented my little dog. I felt very grown-up talking with him. Then he told me he was sad his puppy ran away into the woods behind the neighborhood. Could I please come with him? As a dog lover, he just knew his puppy would come out of hiding if he saw my dog playing in the woods with us. Now, as an adult, I too realize that it is not normal for someone to ask a child they don't know to come with them to another location. So creepy. Dumb as I was, I had no ill feelings. My dog was kind of old and hated playing, so I told him I had to go home. Save my own life. I was a stupid, trusting kid that happened to have a boring old dog. When I was maybe 5 to 6, I went to the grocery store with my mom. I hated standing in line with her, so I'd always beg her to let me go wait on the bench in front of the store, like a big girl. I went out to the bench once, and there was a woman standing near it smoking. She came up to me and said, "Wow, you have such pretty eyes." I just stared and said nothing because she really irked me for some reason. Then she reached for me and said she just wanted to touch my curls. I hated people touching my hair, so I dodged my head to the side and locked eyes with a guy in a van idling by the curb, watching us. I never saw her get out of his van, so I really had no reason to assume they were together, but something about both of them terrified me. I remember gulping in the biggest breath I could and just shrieking, not yelling for help, just a long, ear-piercing shout. It was a small shop and the registers were just inside the door, so everyone heard me and started rushing out. The woman hopped in the van at lightning speed and they took off. When I was around 9 years, I was playing in my front yard. I remember some man on a bike asked me to help him and I agreed. I started walking along with him on the bike till probably 4 to 5 houses down in. I didn't have my footwear on, so I told him I can't go further without my footwear. He insisted I sit on his bike, but something came over me and I ran back. When I reached my house and looked back, he was still looking at me. Told my mom and she came out looking for him, but he had fled. The entire neighborhood was on alert for a few days. Story 2. I've had a few over the years. Remember able ones are when in the woods with my 1-year-old picking up pine cones. It was about 4 p.m. on a summer's day, so still light and warm. Anyway, suddenly this mixed feeling of dread and fear and of being watched came over me. I just picked him up and ran. The next day on our local community Facebook group, another mother reported that her and her 2 little girls had been flashed at in the woods and quite aggressively. Another one was I was heavily pregnant. I went to a Hindu just for the meal and then was going home. I was about to call a taxi when the bride insisted the limo she hired drop me home. I thought it was a funny idea for my husband to see me get home in a limo, so I agreed. The driver seemed fine with it and was a nice chatty guy. We're driving home when suddenly he starts detouring. We're by the docks and he starts pulling into some dodgy-ass car park, not saying a word to me. I called my husband right away and very loudly told him the situation and where I was and that I'd be home in 10 minutes. The driver made some excuse about picking something up from a friend, disappeared for 5 minutes, and then took me home. I'm convinced he had bad intentions, and to this day the regret and pure fear and feeling fucking stupid will never ever leave me. Ladies, we are never safe. Never presume you are. Also, can I just add that as a woman we experience these feelings a lot. More so than men. So if your GF wife or friend who's a girl says let's go, I would go. Story 3. When I was a kid, the neighbor across the street offered me a ride to school when he saw me walking and said he'd give me candy too. It felt off, so I just said no thanks and kept walking, thinking nothing of it. Maybe a year later, he shot and killed his wife and then himself. Story 4. I was walking on the beach with my partner in a country with a pretty high crime rate, and a shady-ass dude with one of the scariest facial expressions I've ever seen started to follow us for almost 10 minutes, and as soon as I saw a bus full of tourists, we jumped right on it. For sure that dude was either rob or kidnap us. Comments. This reminds me of something. I was on vacation with my husband and toddler son in England, which is obviously not a dangerous place usually, but we were staying in a smaller city and I took my son to the playground for a while before meeting my husband for lunch. We had only been there about 5 minutes when this young guy came into the park and sat on a bench very close to us. He had such a scary look on his face, like you describe. We were the only people in the park, and I just got the most terrifying feeling. I loudly said, "Time to go, Daddy's waiting for us right around the corner," and booked it out of there with my son in my arms. I glanced back after we left the park and saw the scary guy leave and go the other direction. Story 5. I was supposed to get off of my retail job at 10 p.m. and catch the first bus I needed to get home. My manager had me stay later, so I had to catch a late bus and change my route since my usual second bus stopped running. I did notice this late bus ride was empty, but the 10 p.m. one was usually pretty full. The stop wasn't my usual spot, so I just sat to wait for the bus. I was texting my best friend and asking her to pick me up because sometimes buses don't show or are late. She wasn't answering me since she ended up working late too. And then I noticed my surroundings. I was just off of a main street, just south of several closed corner stores. I realized this bus bench was on the street nearest to a park that closes at sundown. There were no cars and no people. The streetlight near the bus stop was busted too. I immediately felt unnerved and trapped. Nothing was open and nothing was nearby. A man was walking towards the bench I was waiting on. He was walking from the park. He would pass under a street lamp and be illuminated and then disappear before being lit up by the light again. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. He came up behind the bench and didn't sit down next to me, just stood behind the bench, slightly to my right. Then he started walking around the bench, just circling me. I called my friend and acted like she had answered, but instead I left a voicemail. "Hey, you almost here?" "Yep, I'm still here. I'll hop in as soon as you pull up. Want to grab food?" Now we had McDonald's last week. The dude kept circling me. I was too afraid to even look at his face. I hung up and put my phone away and realized I had my box cutter in my bag. I pulled it out and started playing with it, just pushing the blade in and out. He stopped circling me, and I finally looked at him and stood up. He turned north and walked away. My friend pulled up soon after. We drove right past the guy who was still walking aimlessly. I bought a car about a week later, and I always drove my coworkers home if we worked late together and they needed a ride. Story 6. My great-grandma lives at the far end of a neighborhood, right next to a big, busy street. So there are suspicious characters by her house often. When I was a kid, I visited her every weekend, and one time when I was 11, I was sitting on the living room floor and I heard these two people arguing in Spanish. I hear a lady screaming at the top of her lungs, and having gone to Arizonan schools all my life, I recognize every cuss word. Curious, I went to the kitchen and peeked through the window which looked out onto the street, and something didn't seem right. I felt like I should duck, and the moment I did, the lady pulls a gun out and starts shooting. The man she was arguing with was out of my view, so I didn't know what happened to him, but I was the only witness to that crime. Story 7. I was at a bar with friends that was on the top floor in a building. I was out on the patio and noticed a couple fire trucks coming and parking right in front of the building we're in. I immediately told my friends we should go. We went to the elevators, but they wouldn't come. So we took the stairs. Just when we're heading down, we could hear the fire alarms, and we could hear others coming down the stairs. We were about 4 flights ahead of them. About halfway down, the lights went off, and we coupled hear above us people panicking. As we got closer to the exit, smoke filled the stairway. Firemen finally came and helped us the way down. Story 8. I missed the Westminster Bridge attack by minutes. I was supposed to go meet my husband after a scan at St. Thomas's, so I would have had to cross the bridge to get the tube around to meet him. I was heavily pregnant, slow, and something didn't feel right, so I decided instead to walk to Waterloo East and go home. I was walking towards the station when it happened. Story 9. In Iraq, ca. 2006, was on a foot patrol through a muddy area along the Euphrates River. Myself and my team were walking down this pathway in a somewhat open field along the river, and I look to my left and see a 55-gallon drum laid on its side, and I noticed that we were about to walk parallel to it. I then looked down a bit to my front right and saw a very soft glow coming from the dirt. It was dusk at this point. I turn to my team and say, I think we need to turn around. And as we start walking away, a big-ass explosion goes from under my feet and launches me through the air. A gunfight ensues as the remaining teammates start shooting back, and I regain my scruples to return fire. After a short while, we contain the scene and the look at the crater. The bomb left a crater that was about 8 feet wide and 5 feet deep. The bomb crew people said it was buried too deep and probably why it didn't kill me. The drum on its side was a marking object, so the trigger guy could line us up with the explosive from a distance. The glow I saw was the dusk sunlight glinting off a buried wire that was connected to the bomb. None of my team died or was injured. We turned around just in time. Story 10. I usually tour by myself, split boarding, which means the board you can ski up the hill with skins on the bottom, then you assemble it into a snowboard at the top, which isn't recommended because you should have a buddy to dig you out if there is an avalanche. Because of that, I stick to terrain know well and absolutely won't slide. Headed up on a settled day, but something just felt off. Snow was supposed to be stable at this point with recent weather, but it just wasn't acting like it should. Got passed by 2 other guys heading up and decided to turn around. Now that somebody was above me, I felt like it could be triggered out of my control. I was the last person to see these 2 guys before SAR recovered their bodies. Freak avalanche. Story 11. Was heading south down 31 north through Indianapolis, and for some reason GPS turned us off main road. We figured maybe construction. So while off highway, decided to get something to eat and go to the bathroom. Stopped at a KFC. I went to use facilities and come out and look around a bit and realize counter is behind bulletproof windows. Then also realizing we had seen heavy drug use on the curb of the parking lot. Had a couple guys looking at us, older couple. Me using a cane and driving in a rental vehicle. Back and forth, not saying anything, just slight nods to each other. All of a sudden, it all clicks into place. I said, I don't want chicken after all, is that okay? BF said, yeah, we can figure it out later. Walked out slowly but got in the car and locked it immediately as the ones on the curb started our way as well as the guys in the restaurant. We just took off like a bat out of hell. Our spider senses were way up. Story 12. Someone else mentioned an I need to go home feeling her mom had. Now I haven't had an I need to leave feeling, but I have had an I need to check on my kid feeling. My oldest was in pre-K, and my youngest was in a crib yet. I set my youngest down for a nap and got my older kid ready for school and on the bus. Life is good. I've got time for coffee and a smoke in the garden before either of my kids should need me. The coffee is ready, and the bowl is packed, but I gotta pee. I was already in the downstairs bathroom with my pants unbuttoned when, for some reason, I decided that I really should use the upstairs bathroom and check on Jack. I'm ever so glad I did because today was the day he learned how to crawl out of the crib and up the shelves under the window. He managed to get the blind cords that I had tucked up out of the way. When I tell you my blood ran cold, believe it. Because my 15-month-old was laying on the floor with blue lips and that ducking cord wrapped around his neck. He's fine. It happened over 15 years ago, but my pits still sweat thinking about what might have happened. So, that's the end of the video. Hit the like button and subscribe. Have a good day and see you in the next video.